I watched my son sit at the poker table, grinning with my pension in his pocket. He had no idea the cards had already been dealt by me. Weeks earlier, he stole from me. Tonight, I watched him lose every chip he touched. And when he looked at me, begging like a boy again, I smiled and folded the final card that cut him out for good. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The glow of the computer screen lit up Patricia Moore's face as she adjusted her glasses, squinting at the online banking page. Numbers usually comforted her. Steady deposits, predictable expenses. But tonight her pulse stuttered. A red column of withdrawals blinked back at her, each larger than the last, each tagged with the same location, Silver Stallion Casino, downtown Reno. Her pension account balance was thinner than it had ever been. Her grocery money, her utility cushion vanished. Pat's hand trembled as she reached for her notebook, the one where she logged every expense in neat rows. She ran her finger down the page. Cable bill, groceries, prescriptions. Nothing matched those withdrawals. Her breath caught. She hadn't been near a casino in months. She picked up the phone. Michael's voice came through sluggish, as if he'd been expecting this call. "Hey, Mom, what's up? What's up?" Pat repeated, her tone flat as glass. "What's up? Is my pension's been bleeding out at the Silver Stallion. Care to explain?" A pause, then the sound of his uneasy chuckle. "Oh, that. Yeah, I just borrowed it. Didn't think you'd notice right away." Pat's jaw tightened. She glanced again at the screen. 3,000 gone. Borrowed? That's not borrowed, Michael. That's stolen. Before he could answer, a chirp announced another caller. A text from Tina flashed across her screen. "He'll pay you back, Pat. Please don't make a scene." Pat shut the laptop with a snap. Her throat felt dry, but her anger sharpened her words. That money was for heat this winter. For food. You don't waltz into a casino with my pension like it's play money. Michael's voice turned defensive, petulant. "It's not like you're hurting. You've got savings, and I just needed a little breathing room." Pat stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping against the kitchen floor. The night outside her ranch-style home was silent, the kind of Nevada silence where even the desert seemed to hold its breath. She pressed a palm against the counter to steady herself. "You needed breathing room," she said slowly. "So you took the air out of my lungs." A knock interrupted her fury. Gloria Benson let herself in through the side door, the smell of peppermint gum clinging to her. Her best friend of 30 years looked from Pat's face to the closed laptop and frowned. "You look like you swallowed a lemon. What happened?" Pat covered the receiver and whispered. "He drained my account. The casino." Gloria's eyes narrowed, the sharp kind of look that had cowed students back when they both worked at the elementary school. "Don't you let him slide on this, Pat. Don't you dare." Pat uncovered the phone. Michael was still muttering excuses, promising repayment, promising this and that. Tina's second text buzzed through. "You're being unfair. Families help each other." Pat slammed the phone down, the echo rattling through the kitchen. She could still hear the hollow sound of slot machines in her imagination, coins clinking, lights flashing, her hard-earned pension money vanishing into someone else's jackpot. Gloria crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. "So, what are you going to do?" Pat inhaled slowly, the smell of the leftover pot roast she had forgotten to put away filling her nose. The house felt smaller than ever, closing in with the weight of betrayal. She thought of every coupon she'd clipped, every hour she'd stayed late grading papers, every sacrifice she'd made to keep her head above water since her husband passed. Her lips pressed into a hard line. She looked Gloria dead in the eye, voice low but steady. "If he gambles with my money," she said, reaching for her notebook and sliding it across the table, "I'll gamble with his future." The next morning, Patricia Moore sat at her kitchen table, the checkered cloth beneath her phone damp where she'd spilled coffee from a trembling hand. Her pension card lay beside it, a flimsy piece of plastic that suddenly looked like a loaded weapon, one Michael had already fired. Her pulse steadied as she dialed the bank's customer service line. "Cancel it," she told the agent firmly, after rattling off her account details. Her voice was iron wrapped in velvet. "Shredded in your system. I want a replacement with protections you can't wriggle through." The agent's polite script offered sympathy, promises of fraud alerts, and overnight shipping. When Pat hung up, she slid the useless card into the drawer by the sink and slammed it shut, as though locking away a snake. Gloria appeared a moment later, hair pinned back, cardigan buttoned despite the Nevada heat. She had her car keys in hand. "Let's go to the bank in person. Don't trust the wires. Face to face, that's where you get real answers." Pat nodded, grabbing her purse. The drive downtown was quiet but thick with unspoken anger. Reno's skyline blurred past the window. Casinos flashing neon, even in daylight, their glittering fronts hiding the hollow clang of desperation inside. At the bank, the smell of polished marble and faint disinfectant greeted them. A young teller with nervous energy led them to an office where Pat explained, in measured tones, that her pension had been drained by her son's gambling. The teller's sympathetic eyes darted to Gloria more than once, as if confirming the story wasn't a mistake of old age. By the time Pat left, her account had new locks, text alerts for every withdrawal, dual verification codes, and a fraud flag marked bold red. The pension would never again be an easy mark. Gloria walked at her side, muttering under her breath, "That boy thought he was slick. He forgot who raised him." That evening, Pat sat alone at her kitchen table, the will spread out like a map of the future. The paper smelled faintly of ink and dust, a testament to how rarely she'd pulled it from the safe. Her husband's handwriting in the margins of an older draft peeked through, tiny notes they had once made about splitting modest savings between Michael and a community fund. Back then, they'd still believed Michael would grow into responsibility. Her finger hovered over Michael's name, the ink neat and formal but increasingly foreign to her eyes. She didn't cross it out yet. She only studied it, long enough to feel the ache in her chest harden into resolve. Her phone buzzed against the table, dragging her from the thought. A text from Tina glared at her. "Pat, he messed up, he'll make it right. You have to show some understanding. Families forgive." Pat read it twice, the words souring in her stomach. Understanding, Tina called it. As if betrayal were just a slip of the tongue, easily excused. She turned the phone face down without replying, the vibration rattling against the table, as another message chimed seconds later. She ignored that one too. Gloria returned from making tea, steam rising from two chipped mugs. She set one in front of Pat, then eyed the spread of papers. "Thinking of changes?" she asked softly. Pat lifted her mug, inhaling the scent of black tea, and gave a single measured nod. "Thinking of playing a different hand?" "Yes." The house was quiet except for the tick of the wall clock. Outside, the desert air pressed against the windows, dry and restless. Pat's mind churned with possibilities. Charities she respected, people who had stood by her without asking for handouts, the kind of legacy that didn't vanish on a blackjack table. Just as she slid the will back into its folder, her phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Michael or Tina. The caller ID read, "Silver Stallion Casino." Pat exchanged a sharp glance with Gloria before answering. A crisp, professional woman's voice came through the line. "Mrs. Moore, this is Rosa Alvarez, Guest Services Manager. We've reviewed your account. Would you like to formally contest the charges made in your name?" Pat's grip on the phone tightened. For the first time all day, her lips curled into the faintest smile. The Silver Stallion Casino loomed like a beast of light and sound, as Patricia Moore and Gloria Benson pushed through the heavy glass doors. The sharp smell of cigarette smoke mixed with the sugary scent of comped cocktails. Slot machines chimed in chaotic unison, each bell and whistle, a reminder of how fast money could vanish in this place. Rosa Alvarez was waiting just past the velvet ropes, crisp in a navy suit, her expression equal parts warmth and professionalism. She extended a hand. "Mrs. Moore, I'm Rosa. Thank you for coming in. Let's get you some answers. Pat's handshake was firm, her jaw set. I don't want apologies, she said. I want proof. Rosa led them through the maze of flashing lights to a quieter corridor. The noise dulled behind a thick door, replaced by the hum of an overhead vent. Inside a small surveillance office, rows of screens flickered with security footage, every slot spin, every hand of cards, captured in cold detail. Rosa queued up a recording. This is from last Thursday, she said. On the screen, Michael appeared, shoulders hunched, glancing over his shoulder before swiping a familiar blue pension card at the ATM by the baccarat table. Pat leaned closer, the grainy image tightening like a fist around her chest. Michael's face was too clear to deny. There, Rosa continued, pausing the frame as Michael stuffed bills into his pocket. We logged multiple withdrawals tied to this card. Gloria muttered a curse under her breath, folding her arms tightly. Pat's eyes never left the screen. Her son looked younger in the footage, like a teenager sneaking a cigarette behind the gym. But the truth was right there. He wasn't a boy. He was a man who had made a choice. Pat straightened. I'll need copies of everything. Statements, video, dates, every receipt you've got. Rosa nodded, already sliding a USB drive across the desk. They're yours. I'm truly sorry. Most people don't see the paper trail until it's too late. Pat accepted the drive carefully, almost reverently, as if it were evidence in a trial. She exhaled slowly, then looked Rosa square in the eye. You've done me a kindness, and I don't forget kindness. The casino host gave her a small knowing smile. Most people yell at me in this situation. You're different. I've had 30 years of teaching children who thought they could cheat me. Pat replied dryly. He's just another one of them. Rosa let out a quick laugh, respectful but edged with admiration. If you need me again, you'll know where to find me. Back on the casino floor, the music from the slot machines swelled around them again. The flashing lights reflected off Gloria's glasses as she leaned toward Pat. You should sit down at a table, she whispered. Play a hand or two yourself. Show him you can beat him at his own game. Pat chuckled softly, shaking her head, but the thought lingered longer than she admitted. Her eyes caught the flicker of a poker table nearby, chips stacked high, the shuffle of cards like an invitation. Maybe she would. Someday. Not tonight, but someday. As they stepped back into the cool night air, Pat's phone buzzed. She pulled it from her coat pocket and squinted at the screen. A new email had landed from Carl Dwyer, her attorney. Bring all your documents tomorrow. Don't leave anything out. Pat tucked the phone away, her lips pressed into a determined line. Tomorrow would not be about loss. It would be about taking control. The manila folder in Patricia Moore's lap felt heavier than paper should. Inside were her pension statements, printouts of the casino withdrawals, and the grainy stills Rosa Alvarez had given her of Michael's hand swiping her card. Proof stacked neatly, damning as any courtroom exhibit. She held it close on the drive downtown, her knuckles pale against the folder's edge. Carl Dwyer's office occupied a modest suite above a florist's shop. The faint perfume of roses followed Pat and Gloria into the building, clashing with the scent of floor polish in the narrow stairwell. By the time they stepped into the office itself, Pat's nerves had hardened into resolve. Carl rose from behind his oak desk, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. Patricia, he said warmly, shaking her hand. Gloria, always a pleasure. Let's get you settled. Pat placed the folder on his desk with deliberate care. The papers spread like a wound once open, harsh black numbers glaring against white. Carl paged through them methodically, his brow tightening with each withdrawal. He paused longest on the casino footage, clicking his tongue softly. That's your son. No question, he said finally. He left you no wiggle room. Good thing is this gives us plenty. Pat's voice was quiet, but steady. I want him out. Him and Tina both. I worked too long for that money to watch it turn into poker chips. Gloria sat straight-backed in the leather chair beside her, eyes sharp. She means it, Carl. This isn't a warning. It's the real thing. Carl leaned back, folding his hands. Then we'll make it official. Amendments to your will effective immediately. Michael and Tina will be excluded as heirs. Your estate can be directed wherever you choose. Pat exhaled, the sound part relief, part grief. She thought of her husband for a fleeting second, what he would have said if he'd seen their only son gamble away his mother's dignity. She reached for a pen without hesitation. Carl began typing, the steady click of keys filling the room. The printer whirred to life, spitting out fresh pages that smelled of ink and warm toner. He slid them across the desk. This is preliminary, but it sets the stage. Once signed, Michael is formally out until you decide otherwise. Gloria, you can serve as a witness if you like. Gloria stood immediately, smoothing her skirt. Gladly. I've been witness to worse. Might as well witness something right. Pat picked up the pen. Her hand didn't tremble this time. She signed her name with a flourish she hadn't used in years, the bold curve of her P slicing through any doubt that lingered. Gloria signed next, her script sharp and decisive. Carl notarized the page with a heavy stamp, the thunk echoing in the small office. When it was done, Pat pushed the papers away and leaned back in her chair. The knot in her chest loosened for the first time since she'd seen her emptying account. It was as if she had pushed Michael's grasping hands off her shoulders and reclaimed the air he'd stolen. Carl gathered the documents, tucking them into a clean folder. We'll finalize everything in a few days. But Patricia, rest easy, you've already taken the hardest step. Pat rose, smoothing her jacket, her face lighter than when she had arrived. I don't rest easy, she said, though there was the faintest smile tugging her lips. But I rest prepared. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright on the Reno sidewalk. Gloria looped her arm through Pat's as they walked to the car. You look 10 years younger, Gloria teased. I feel 10 pounds lighter, Pat replied, her steps brisk, the weight of betrayal shifting into resolve. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out absently, expecting another of Tina's guilt-laden texts. But the caller ID froze her mid-step. Michael Moore. She hesitated before answering. His voice came through too quickly, too cheerful, as if nothing had happened. Hey Mom, he said, almost sing-song. Can I come by? The knock on Patricia Moore's front door was too cheerful, the kind of knock that belonged to neighbors borrowing sugar, not sons caught stealing. She hesitated only long enough to see through the peephole. Michael stood there, flowers in hand, grinning like a man who thought charm could bleach away betrayal. Pat opened the door just enough to let the afternoon breeze drift in. The faint scent of gasoline from Tina's idling SUV floated on the air. Michael thrust the flowers forward. For you, Mom. Thought you could use a little pick-me-up. The bouquet was gaudy, roses and carnations crammed together in cheap cellophane, still damp from the grocery store cooler. Pat took them, not out of gratitude, but because letting them drop would have given him drama to play off. She carried them to the kitchen counter without a word, their cloying perfume filling the space. Michael laughed lightly, scratching the back of his neck. Look, about the whole casino thing, I might have gone a little overboard. You know me, right? Always thinking I can win big. Pat pulled out a chair at the kitchen table and sat, her eyes fixed on him, silent as stone. Gloria was already there, pretending to flip through a magazine. Her phone rested face down on the table, recording every word. Michael shifted under their combined stares, the grin faltering. I mean, come on, you know I'll pay you back. It's not like I ran off to Vegas with it. Just a few rough nights at the Stallion, that's all. Pat finally spoke, her voice flat. That was my winter heating bill, my grocery money, not your fun money. He waved a dismissive hand. You've got savings. You don't need to nickel and dime yourself. I'll straighten it out. I always do. Through the window, Pat could see Tina in the SUV, scrolling on her phone, barely glancing toward the house. The sight twisted the knife. Tina wasn't here to mend fences. She was here to make sure Michael did damage control. Gloria crossed her arms, the magazine sliding shut. She doesn't need promises, Michael, she needs respect. And you're fresh out. Michael shot her a glare. This is between me and Mom. Pat folded her hands neatly on the table, her wedding ring catching the light. Then start talking like a son, not a hustler. The flowers on the counter seemed to wilt in the silence that followed. Michael exhaled loudly, the fake confidence draining from his shoulders. He leaned on the chair opposite her, his face softening into something like pleading. "You'll forgive me," he said, his voice low now, coaxing. "You always do. That's what moms are for, right? Picking up the slack, giving their kids another chance." Pat looked at him, truly looked at the tired lines creeping into his 44-year-old face, at the restless tapping of his fingers, at the man who had learned that excuses came easier than effort. Her silence stretched so long that Michael's smirk began to curl back into place, as if he thought her hesitation meant surrender. But then Pat's lips parted, and her voice carried the weight of steel. "Not this time," she said. Every syllable sharp. "You're out." Michael's smile evaporated as Patricia Moore rose from the table and walked to the hallway cabinet. He tried to follow her with his eyes, but the bravado he'd carried in with his cheap bouquet began to crack. The silence in the kitchen was too heavy, broken only by the faint rumble of Tina's SUV engine outside. Pat returned carrying a slim leather folder. She laid it on the table with the same calm precision she used to grade spelling tests decades ago. Sliding it open, she turned the document so it faced him. The ink was fresh, the signatures clear. "This," she said evenly, tapping the top page, "is the amended draft of my will. You'll notice your name and Tina's are no longer anywhere in it." For a heartbeat, Michael didn't breathe. His face flushed crimson, creeping from his neck to his ears. He leaned closer, scanning the words he could barely focus on. "You can't do that," he sputtered, his voice cracking into anger. "You can't just cut me out. I'm your son." Pat's gaze didn't waver. "Watch me." Gloria, seated nearby, shifted her phone to make sure the microphone still caught every word. She didn't speak, but her steady presence pressed on Michael like a weight. Michael slammed a hand against the table, rattling the vase of flowers he had brought as a bribe. "This isn't fair. I made one mistake." Pat cut him off, her voice low and sharp. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You saw my pension as free chips for the table. I'm not financing your recklessness, not anymore." Through the window, Tina's silhouette remained glued to her phone, uninterested in the storm raging inside. Michael's eyes flicked toward the driveway, as though hoping she'd rescue him from this conversation. But Tina didn't move. "You're doing this to punish me," he accused, his words spitting out like sparks. "You're letting her," he jabbed a finger toward Gloria, "fill your head with poison." Gloria finally spoke, her voice dry but calm. "If telling her the truth is poison, then maybe you should have built yourself an antidote." Michael's fists balled at his sides, his breathing ragged. He looked less like a grown man, and more like a boy caught cheating on a test, cornered and furious at being exposed. Pat closed the folder with a snap and slid it back into her lap. "This isn't up for debate. You're out." The finality in her tone sucked the air from the room. Michael's mouth opened and shut, but no argument came. He kicked the chair leg instead, the screech of wood on tile echoing. Gloria rose, moving to stand between him and Pat. "Time to go, Michael." He glared at both women, chest heaving. For a moment Pat thought he might refuse, might cause a scene right there in her kitchen. But then his shoulders sagged. He turned and stalked toward the door, muttering under his breath. From the porch, the slam of the screen door rattled the house. "Se fin torch sti, sitzen summon." The SUV's engine revved as he slid back into the passenger seat. A moment later, Pat's phone buzzed sharply on the table. She didn't need to check to know who it was. Gloria leaned over, squinting at the notification. "Tina, looks like she found her voice now." Pat unlocked the phone. The text was venomous. "How dare you embarrass Michael like that? After all he's done for you, you'll regret cutting family out of your life." Pat set the phone down without replying. Her hands were steady now, the way they got when she knew her lesson plan was airtight, when no student could derail her classroom. The house grew quiet again, save for the hum of the refrigerator and Gloria's slow exhale. Then the phone rang. This time it wasn't Tina. The caller ID showed Carl Dwyer's name. Pat answered, her voice calm. Patricia, Carl said, his tone brisk but satisfied. The final version of the will is ready. All we need is your signature. Pat's eyes lifted to Gloria's, and a smile curved at the corner of her mouth. The real endgame had just begun. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books, a mix that carried the weight of decisions carved into permanence. Patricia Moore sat at the polished oak table, pen poised above the stack of papers Carl Dwyer had placed in front of her. The documents looked deceptively plain, but Pat knew they were more powerful than any deck of cards Michael had ever held. Carl leaned back, calm but intent. Patricia, this is it. The final version. Once signed and notarized, it stands as your binding will. Michael and Tina are formally removed. Your estate transfers exactly as you've instructed. Pat glanced at Gloria, seated beside her, arms folded across her cardigan. Gloria's nod was firm, the kind of nod that said you're doing the right thing, no matter how loud the protests get later. Pat inhaled, the scent of lemon polish grounding her. Then she signed her name, the black ink flowing in deliberate strokes. With each letter, it was as if she was cutting a thread that had been strangling her for years. By the time she wrote the final more, the air around her felt lighter, freer. Carl gathered the signed pages and pressed his notary stamp down with a firm thunk. The embossed seal shimmered faintly in the light streaming through the blinds. There, he said, sliding the papers back into their folder. It's official. The new beneficiaries are Gloria Benson and the Reno Literacy Fund. Gloria blinked at the mention of her name. Fee, Pat smiled softly. Yes, you. You've been more of a daughter than any I ever had, more family than Michael's tried to be in years. And the Literacy Fund, well, you know I always said I wanted to leave something behind for the kids who struggle. Gloria reached over, squeezing her hand. Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. You're a stubborn woman, Pat, but you've got one hell of a heart. The office grew quiet, the silence filled only by the distant sound of the florist's bell downstairs. For a moment Pat allowed herself to sit in the weight of her decision. She had carved her own ending, not one dictated by guilt or manipulation. As they gathered their things, Pat's phone buzzed. A message from Rosa Alvarez lit the screen. Complimentary casino vouchers for you, Mrs. Moore. A gesture of respect for how you've handled everything. Pat chuckled, shaking her head as she showed Gloria. Now that's poetic justice. The casino giving me free chips while Michael can't touch a dime. Gloria snorted. You should frame the voucher, not spend it. Carl smirked as he handed over the sealed folder. Whatever you do with it, Patricia, you've already won. By the time Pat arrived home, the Nevada sun was dipping low, the horizon painted in burnt orange and lavender. She placed the folder carefully into her home safe, her fingers brushing the cool metal of the lock. The click as it shut sounded final, comforting, like the closing of a chapter. She poured herself a glass of iced tea, the cubes clinking lightly, and sat at the table with Gloria. They didn't need to speak much. The air itself felt filled with resolution. Pat sipped, savoring the tart sweetness, and allowed herself a smile she hadn't worn in months. But her phone chimed again. This time it wasn't Rosa. It was Michael. His name appeared on her screen, not as a call or a text, but tagged in a public post on Facebook. Gloria leaned over as Pat opened it, the glow of the screen casting blue shadows across their faces. Some people forget who family is. The post read, but everyone will remember what kind of mother cuts her own son out of her life. Pat's smile vanished. She set the phone down slowly, her jaw tightening. The battle wasn't over, not yet. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across Patricia Moore's kitchen table. Her phone buzzed against the wood, screen lighting up with a screenshot. Gloria had sent. Pat opened it, the blue and white blur of Facebook filling her eyes. Michael's words were there in bold, reckless letters. Some people forget who family is. Imagine being cut off by your own mother. Heartless doesn't begin to cover it. Beneath it, comments already multiply. Hang in there, Mike. That's cold. Family comes first. Pat sipped her tea. its steam curling around her face. Her hand was steady. He's making noise, she murmured. Noise fades. Gloria, perched across from her, snorted. He thinks Facebook is the Supreme Court. He's preaching to people who've never had to pay your heating bill. But by midday, Pat could feel the whispers floating around the neighborhood like pollen on the wind. At the diner, two women at the counter leaned close, voices dropping when she passed. At the senior center, a man at the check-in desk asked too casually, "Everything okay at home, Pat?" Even at the grocery store, in the frozen foods aisle, she caught Mrs. Hensley from across the street, watching her with wide, curious eyes. Pat didn't flinch. She carried her basket with calm precision, choosing her bread, her eggs, her half and half, as though no one's opinion could spoil her list. She had lived long enough to know gossip was just air, and air couldn't bruise you unless you let it. Back at her house, Gloria set down a bag of groceries and sighed. "If Michael thinks embarrassing you will bring you back around, he's dumber than I thought." Pat folded her receipt neatly. "He's always played for an audience. But I don't have to sit in the theater." Her phone rang that evening, breaking the rhythm of their silence. Rosa Alvarez's warm voice carried through the line. "Mrs. Moore, I wanted to extend a personal invitation. We host a poker night for seniors every Friday. Nothing high stakes, just cards, conversation, and a few laughs. I think you'd enjoy it." Pat's lips curved. "Poker night at the casino? That's irony." Rosa chuckled. "Sometimes irony tastes better than revenge. Come, you'll see." So Friday evening, Pat and Gloria stepped into a corner room at the Silver Stallion, far from the deafening slot machines. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and cinnamon pastries. A round table held stacks of chips in pastel colors, playing cards crisp and new. Around it sat a half-dozen seniors, faces weathered but eyes alive with mischief. "Welcome, Patricia," Rosa said warmly, pulling out a chair. "We saved you a seat." Pat settled in, running her fingers across the smooth felt of the table. For the first time in weeks, she felt no pressure, no weight of betrayal, just the shuffle of cards and the hum of quiet camaraderie. The games began. Gloria kept score with a pencil, her eyebrows dancing each time Pat laid down a winning hand. The others teased, joked, and traded stories about children and grandchildren, stories that made Pat smile without envy, because she no longer measured her worth against Michael's failure. She leaned back, sipping the complimentary coffee, letting the warmth spread through her chest. For once, she wasn't thinking about bank accounts or wills. She was just a woman at a table, playing her cards with friends. Then the air shifted. The door at the back creaked open, and in stepped Michael. He wasn't dressed for the occasion, jeans wrinkled, shirt untucked, eyes scanning the room with restless energy. For a moment the chatter at the table faltered. Pat's stomach tightened, but her face remained composed. Michael's eyes locked on hers, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Mind if I join?" he said, pulling up a chair without waiting for permission. The table went silent. The shuffle of cards stopped in midair. Michael slid into the empty chair as if he owned it, dragging the legs across the carpet with an abrasive scrape. The seniors around the table traded glances, half disapproving, half curious. His cologne, sharp and cheap, mingled unpleasantly with the coffee and pastry smells that had filled the room only minutes before. "Evening, everyone," he said, plastering on a grin. "Hope you don't mind if I add a little competition." Patricia Moore didn't look at him directly. She stacked her chips carefully, the soft click of plastic sounding like punctuation to her silence. Gloria caught her eye across the table, smirking as if to say, "Let him dig his own grave." The dealer, a retiree named Hank with a steady shuffle, dealt the cards. The table's chatter resumed, though quieter now, like a room adjusting to an unwelcome guest. Michael leaned back in his chair, stretching theatrically. "Poker's in my blood. Learned it young. Mom here didn't exactly approve, but hey, look at us now." A low chuckle ran through the group, not with him but at him. Pat sipped her coffee, letting the bitter taste steady her. She didn't respond. The first hand was quick. Michael bet big, grinning at Gloria, as if daring her to fold. She raised him without blinking. When he laid down a pair of eights, she revealed a flush. His grin faltered. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, forcing a laugh. But it wasn't luck. It was patience. The seniors had seen gamblers like him before. Swagger up front, panic when the chips started shrinking. Hand after hand, Michael leaned too far forward, too eager, his pile of chips thinning like melting ice. Pat played the opposite game, steady, restrained, folding when she should, staying in just long enough to let him trap himself. She didn't gloat, didn't flinch. Her quiet presence unnerved him more than any taunt could. By the fourth round, sweat had beaded along his temples. He loosened his collar, glancing at Tina's text alerts lighting up his phone in his lap, but he ignored them. His chips were nearly gone, and the seniors around the table were openly amused. Gloria kept score on her pad, her smirk widening each time she marked another win under someone else's column. When Michael slammed down a losing hand, Gloria didn't even look up, just announced the totals in her dry, teacherly voice. Patricia's winnings 8, Michael's 0. Laughter rippled around the table, not cruel, but knowing, the laughter of people who had lived too long to be impressed by bravado. Michael's jaw tightened. "You're all enjoying this a little too much." Pat finally met his eyes. Her voice was calm, her words cutting. "You walked in here thinking you'd win. But poker isn't about charm, Michael. It's about discipline, something you've never had." The final hand came quickly. He went all in, desperation leaking from every gesture. Hank dealt with his usual calm, Rosa watching closely from the sidelines. The cards hit the table. Michael had nothing but a high card. Pat revealed her hand, a modest 2-pair, enough to beat him clean. The room broke into light applause. Michael shoved back from the table, his chair scraping loud enough to echo. His face was red, his fists tight. "Rigged," he spat, though no one dignified it with a response. Rosa stepped forward smoothly, her voice warm but firm. "Michael, thank you for joining us. But poker night is for members. I'll walk you out." For a moment Pat thought he might refuse. But Rosa's poised presence and the quiet, steady stares of the seniors pressed him down. Shoulders slumping, he followed her to the door, muttering under his breath. When the room settled, Pat stacked her modest pile of winnings, just enough chips to trade for a few dollars. She slipped them into her purse, the weight of them not monetary, but symbolic. She had faced him on his chosen ground, and she had won. Gloria raised her coffee in salute. "Looks like the house isn't the only one who comes out ahead tonight." Pat let herself smile. Small but sure. Sometimes all it takes is playing the long game. As the laughter resumed, her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out, expecting another bitter message from Tina. But it wasn't her. It was Carl. She answered, and his voice came clear, brisk with an energy that made her sit straighter. "Patricia," Carl said. "I've been reviewing your accounts. Your pension funds can cover more than just inheritance. If you want, we can channel some into broader charity projects. You'd leave a legacy far bigger than you imagine." Pat's heart gave a sharp, unexpected jolt. For the first time, she realized her revenge might not only punish Michael, it could build something lasting. Patricia Moore sat across from Carl Dwyer in his office, her fingers grazing the rim of a cooling mug of coffee. Outside the window, Reno's afternoon sun gleamed off parked cars, harsh and bright, but inside the office the air felt deliberate, calm, like decisions were supposed to be made here. Carl tapped a folder on the desk, his expression both practical and quietly excited. "Your pension account has more flexibility than you might think. We can establish a charitable trust, something living. It can funnel directly into causes you choose, not just sit in an account waiting for heirs to burn through." Pat tilted her head, absorbing the words. A charitable trust, something that carried her name not as a handout, but as a foundation. She thought of all the students she'd taught who struggled over the simplest words, the kids who whispered, "I hate reading," with shame in their eyes. "Literacy," she said finally, her voice sure. "It should go to literacy programs in local schools. Kids need a fighting chance with books, before anyone gives them cards to play." Carl nodded, jotting notes. The Reno Literacy Fund can be expanded under your name. Your pension becomes seed money. Every year students will benefit. A legacy you control, not one Michael can touch. For the first time in weeks, Pat's chest didn't feel heavy. It felt wide, almost buoyant. Then let's do it. Let's build something bigger than him. The following afternoon, Gloria sat at Pat's kitchen table with her reading glasses sliding down her nose. She scribbled phrases on a yellow legal pad, expanding opportunities for young readers, building futures one page at a time. Pat chuckled softly. You sound like a campaign manager. Gloria lifted her chin. Someone has to sell this right. It's not just about your money, it's about the story. The kids, and maybe a little about showing Michael this isn't about him anymore. They worked side by side, editing sentences, testing slogans aloud. The smell of brewing coffee filled the kitchen, mingling with the scratch of Gloria's pen. By the end of the day, they had the bones of an announcement: Patricia Moore Charitable Trust for Literacy. Pat read it once, then twice, her lips pressing into a thin but proud line. I like it. Clean, strong. Kids will see books instead of cards when they hear my name. A day later, Rosa Alvarez met them at the Silver Stallion, not in the loud casino floor, but in the grand ballroom upstairs. The moment the double doors swung open, Pat froze. The room stretched wide, ceilings glittering with chandeliers, the carpet patterned in swirls of gold and red, tables draped in white linen lined the edges. The faint scent of polish and citrus cleaner mixed with the sweetness of flowers freshly delivered. Rosa spread her arms. This could be your stage, Mrs. Moore. A fundraiser to launch the trust. We'll donate the space. Of course. Pat laughed, a genuine laugh, rich and surprised. You want me to hold a literacy fundraiser in a casino ballroom? Rosa's smile was quick, sly. Irony works. People will come for the story, and you'll have the upper hand for once. Besides, casinos love good press. Gloria whispered, You couldn't write this better if you tried. Pat stepped further inside, her footsteps echoing across the polished floor. She imagined the tables filled, neighbors and reporters buzzing, her name attached not to shame but to change. The thought settled in her bones like sunlight. Do it, she said finally. Book the ballroom. Over the next week, the pieces came together quickly. Flyers drafted, invitations designed, Rosa's event staff planning hors d'oeuvres and wine. Gloria handled phone calls to the local paper, her voice brimming with energy. Pat herself practiced a short speech in the mirror, smoothing her blouse and testing the rhythm of her words. At night she slept deeper, her dreams not of slot machines but of classrooms, rows of children lifting books with confidence. The momentum was intoxicating, until the message arrived. Pat was sitting on her porch at dusk, the desert air cooling, sipping sweet tea with Gloria when her phone vibrated. A new text from Tina lit the screen. You're embarrassing us publicly. Stop this fundraiser before you humiliate the whole family. Pat stared at the words, the ice in her glass clinking as it shifted. The night around her seemed to hold its breath. The Silver Stallion's grand ballroom shimmered that evening, chandeliers throwing golden light across white linen tables. The air carried the faint perfume of lilies from towering arrangements, mixed with the sharper tang of champagne corks just popped. A banner stretched across the stage, Patricia Moore Charitable Trust for Literacy. Pat stood near the entrance in her navy dress, her hands clasped around a program. The sight before her almost stole her breath. Neighbors she'd known for decades, teachers from old schools, even strangers who had heard the story and wanted to be part of something bigger. The room hummed with conversation, laughter, the occasional clink of glasses. Rosa Alvarez moved through the crowd with her practiced grace, clipboard in hand, every detail under her control. She brushed past Pat and squeezed her hand. Full house, she whispered, pride in her voice. You've already won tonight. Camera lights flashed as a reporter from the Reno Gazette approached, snapping pictures of Pat in front of her banner. Mrs. Moore, How does it feel to turn personal hardship into something this hopeful? Pat smiled, the warmth in her chest steadier than nerves. It feels like what I should have been doing all along. Helping kids read, that's worth more than any card game. Applause broke out later when Gloria took the stage. She adjusted the microphone, her voice strong but tinged with emotion. I've known Pat for over 30 years, she began, her eyes glinting in the light. She taught children how to find their voices in books, and when life tried to silence her, she found a louder one, not for herself, but for every child in this community. The crowd clapped, some dabbing at their eyes. Pat blinked back her own tears, clutching her program tighter. Then Rosa stepped up with a polished plaque, its gold lettering catching the light. On behalf of the Silver Stallion and this community, we honor Patricia Moore, teacher, advocate, and builder of futures. She handed it to Pat, who felt the weight settle in her hands, solid and real. For a moment Pat felt radiant. She stood taller, her smile genuine, her heart swelling with something beyond revenge. This was legacy, not whispered gossip, not Facebook posts, but a ballroom full of people who believed in her cause. But the warmth fractured in an instant. The double doors at the back slammed open, the noise echoing off the marble floors. Conversations died mid-sentence, heads turning. Michael strode inside, his shirt untucked, his hair disheveled, his face red from more than just the Nevada chill. "Don't clap for her," he shouted, his voice slicing through the hush. "You don't know the whole story." Gasps rippled across the room. Gloria stepped down from the stage, her jaw set. Rosa moved swiftly toward him, but Michael's voice boomed louder. "I have something to say," he demanded, his eyes locking on Pat, "and everyone here deserves to hear it." Pat froze, the plaque heavy in her hands, the light of the chandeliers suddenly too bright. The ballroom that had moments ago been filled with celebration now held its breath. The microphone squealed as Michael lunged toward the stage, his hand outstretched, eyes blazing. The polished plaque slipped slightly in Patricia Moore's grasp, but Rosa Alvarez was faster. She stepped between Michael and the mic, her posture tall and immovable. "This is not your stage," Rosa said, voice low but cutting through the hush of the ballroom. Michael sneered. "I'm her son. If anyone gets to speak tonight, it's me." The crowd stirred uneasily, champagne glasses clinking as whispers rippled through the room. The sharp scent of lilies, once comforting, now seemed suffocating under the heat of tension. Pat rose from her chair at the front row, setting the plaque gently on the table. She smoothed her navy dress with deliberate calm, each motion a choice not to match Michael's chaos. The click of her heels echoed as she ascended the stage. "Enough," she said, her voice steady but resonant. No microphone, no amplification, yet every ear tuned to her. Michael froze mid-step. His anger faltered, replaced by the flicker of something less certain. Pat reached for the microphone, Rosa guarded, and Rosa relinquished it without hesitation. The ballroom lights seemed to burn hotter, the hush thicker, but Pat didn't flinch. "I know why my son is angry," she began, the words crisp and deliberate. "He wants you to believe this night is about him." "It isn't." Michael shifted, opening his mouth, but Pat lifted her hand. The gesture was simple, but it silenced him more effectively than shouting ever could. "This night," she continued, her gaze sweeping the crowd, "is about children who struggle to read, about classrooms full of kids who see words as locked doors instead of keys. I taught those children for decades. I saw the way the world treats them like they're invisible. And I will not let them stay invisible." The audience leaned in. Even the camera crews lowered their lenses. Listening, Pat's voice grew stronger, richer. "I built this trust not because of what was taken from me, but because of what I still have the chance to give. My pension won't sit in a casino. It will buy books. It will fund tutors. It will give a child the moment where letters finally turn into meaning." Applause began, tentative at first, then swelling into a wave. The sound rolled through the ballroom like thunder. Michael's jaw clenched. "You're embarrassing me," he spat, but his voice sounded small under the roar of clapping hands. Pat turned her head, meeting his eyes for the first time that night. Her tone softened, but the steel beneath it remained. No, Michael, you embarrassed yourself. I'm done carrying that weight. The words landed with finality. He stood there, red-faced, his fists clenching and unclenching. For a heartbeat, Pat thought he might lash out again, but the applause drowned him, pressed him into insignificance. Rosa gestured toward the door with quiet authority. Time to go. Humiliation flickered across Michael's face. Shoulders sagging, he turned sharply, storming out of the ballroom as murmurs followed him like shadows. The doors slammed behind him, leaving only the echo of applause in his wake. Pat exhaled, steadying herself, then lifted the microphone once more. Now, she said, with a half-smile that drew laughter from the crowd, where were we? The ballroom erupted in warmth again. Glasses were raised, strangers clapped her on the back. Cameras flashed. Pat returned to her seat beside Gloria, her pulse finally slowing. She picked up the plaque again, its engraved letters gleaming. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was defending herself. She felt like she was leading something. As the night wound down, Carl Dwyer appeared at her side, folder tucked beneath his arm, his expression both satisfied and serious. He leaned close, so only she and Gloria could hear. Patricia, he said softly, it's time for the final inheritance seal. Pat's breath caught, not from fear, but from the gravity of the moment. The applause still rang in her ears as she realized, tonight had been only the rehearsal. Tomorrow her legacy would be locked beyond reach. The hum of Carl Dwyer's office printer filled the quiet room, spitting out the final stack of papers. Patricia Moore sat upright in her chair, hands folded, her eyes fixed on the neat black letters that would soon decide everything. The air smelled faintly of toner and lemon polish, the same scent that had followed every step of this process, but today it felt different, heavier, final. Carl slid the documents across the desk. This is it, Patricia. Once signed and stamped, there's no going back. Every penny, every asset, every legacy choice becomes binding. Pat pulled her reading glasses from their case, unfolding them with deliberate calm. She skimmed the pages slowly, each line reinforcing the truth she had already accepted. Her house, her pension, her savings, her future. None of it would pass to Michael, not a dime. Instead, Gloria Benson's name appeared in bold. So did the Reno Literacy Trust. A neat section at the bottom contained an addendum, Pat's written explanation, stating clearly why her son was excluded. Carl had helped her craft it carefully, not vindictive but undeniable. This decision was made not out of anger, but necessity. I choose to leave my estate to those who honor work, honesty, and community, rather than squander what was built with sacrifice. Pat's hand hovered above the signature line. For a moment she saw Michael's face as a child, clutching a spelling workbook, struggling to sound out the words. She remembered the hope she once had that he'd grow into responsibility. But that boy was gone, buried under debts and excuses. She signed. Patricia Moore, in her looping, confident script. The sound of Carl's notary stamp came down with a heavy thunk, pressing into the paper, leaving a seal no one could undo. He leaned back, satisfied. It's official. Your estate is protected. Michael cannot contest this without failing. Gloria reached across the table, her hand warm over Pat's. You did it. You really did it. Pat let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The knot in her chest unraveled. I feel like I've been holding my cards too long, she murmured. And I finally folded the right hand. Carl smiled faintly, gathering the documents. Sometimes the strongest play is walking away. They celebrated in the simplest way. Gloria drove them to their favorite diner, the kind with neon buzzing in the window and cracked leather booths. The scent of fried onions and fresh pie hung in the air as they slid into their usual corner. Pat ordered apple pie with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. When the plate arrived, the steam of warm cinnamon drifted upward, mingling with the cold sweetness of melting cream. She took a slow bite, savoring it more than she had savored any months. Gloria raised her coffee cup. To freedom, to legacies well spent. Pat clinked her fork against the mug, her lips curving into a genuine smile. and to never gambling on the wrong people again. They laughed softly, the sound blending with the chatter of other diners and the clatter of dishes. For the first time in a long while, peace sat across the table from Pat instead of bitterness. Later that evening, Pat returned home. The Nevada sky was streaked with deep purples and fading orange, the desert air cooling against her skin. She opened her front door to find a small package on the porch, neatly wrapped with a silver ribbon. Inside was a polished wooden case. She lifted the lid and gasped. A poker set, sleek chips, a deck of cards, and an engraved brass plate on the inside lid. The words gleamed in the soft light of her living room: Patricia Moore, the real winner. A note tucked inside bore Rosa Alvarez's handwriting: for the woman who played the longest game, with respect, Rosa. Pat's hand trembled as she touched the engraving, not with weakness, but with the stunned weight of recognition. Her revenge wasn't just survival, it had become triumph. The polished wooden poker set sat proudly on Patricia Moore's living room shelf, its engraved brass plate catching the afternoon light. The real winner. Each time Pat passed it, she felt a flicker of strength, a reminder that she hadn't just survived Michael's betrayal, she had beaten him at his own game without ever touching a roulette wheel. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Neighbors who had once whispered in the grocery store now dropped by with genuine curiosity. Mrs. Hensley brought over banana bread and stood staring at the poker case. "That's beautiful, Pat," she murmured, her eyes wide. "I heard Rosa Alvarez herself gave it to you." Pat smiled, pouring tea for them both. "She said I'd earned it. I suppose I have." It didn't take long before Gloria suggested, half joking and half determined, that they ought to christen the set properly. By the following week, Pat's modest ranch-style home became the unlikely center for poker nights, the air filled with the warm scent of coffee and butter cookies, the shuffle of cards, and Gloria's dry commentary as she dealt. "You're bluffing again," Gloria teased one Friday, sliding chips across the table. Pat raised an eyebrow, laying down a winning hand. "Or maybe I'm just better at keeping a straight face." The room erupted in laughter, the kind that shook the walls and made Pat's shoulders relax in ways they hadn't in years. The clinking of chips, the crack of ice in glasses, the gentle hum of the old ceiling fan overhead, it all wove together into a rhythm of belonging. More often than not, Pat came out on top. She wasn't reckless, she wasn't flashy. She played steady, patient, the way she'd lived her life. When she scooped in the modest pile of chips, the applause and chuckles from her friends felt richer than any jackpot downtown. On one particularly lively evening, Rosa herself stopped by, slipping into a chair with the easy confidence of someone who belonged anywhere she went. She set a small envelope on the table. "Complimentary vouchers," Rosa said with a grin. "Figured the casino owes you at least a few nights of entertainment, considering the mess your son left behind." Pat laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I'll put them to better use than he ever did. Or frame them," Gloria quipped. "Proof the house doesn't always win." The night rolled on in a haze of laughter and stories, cards sliding smoothly across the felt, glasses clinking as neighbors toasted to Pat's resilience. The poker set gleamed from the shelf, a quiet crown in the corner of the room. For Pat, these evenings weren't just games, they were reclamations of her space, her dignity, her story. No Facebook posts could undo the sight of neighbors gathered in her home, smiling, cheering, celebrating her, not Michael's accusations. As the last guests departed and Gloria began stacking the chips back into their case, Pat stood at the doorway, breathing in the cool Nevada night. The desert air carried the faint smell of sagebrush, crisp and clean, as if even the earth itself was offering her a fresh start. On the coffee table, among the empty teacups and scattered score sheets, sat a thick envelope recently delivered by the mailman. The official stamp was unmistakable. Pat picked it up, her pulse quickening. Carl Dorier's return address was printed neatly in the corner. Inside, she knew, was the certified copy of her final will, the document that sealed everything she had fought for, every card she had chosen to play. Her fingers lingered on the envelope's flap, the laughter from the night still echoing faintly in her ears. Tomorrow she would open it. Tonight she allowed herself to savor the moment. The thick binder sat on Patricia Moore's lap, its navy cover embossed with a silver seal, Carl's certified copy of her final will. She had waited for this moment, not with anxiety, but with the calm of a woman who knew every choice had already been made. The edges of the papers smelled faintly of ink and cardboard, sharp and new. She opened the binder slowly, her fingertips brushing over the embossed pages. Each line was firm, binding, irreversible. Her house, her pension, her savings, not to Michael, not to Tina. Instead to Gloria Benson and the Reno Literacy Trust. She read the words like a prayer. Each clause another stitch in the safety net she had built for children who needed it, and for the friend who had never once gambled with her trust. Pat closed the binder with a satisfying snap. Rising, she walked to the safe tucked into the corner of her bedroom, the numbers on the dial smooth under her fingertips. With a quiet click, the steel door swung open. She slid the binder inside and shut it carefully, the echo of the lock ringing final. In the kitchen, Gloria was already waiting with 2 glasses of whiskey, the golden liquid catching the last of the evening light. She lifted one in Pat's direction, to friendship, to dignity, to outplaying the ones who thought they held the cards. Pat accepted her glass, the rim cool against her fingers. They clinked lightly, the sound small but resonant in the quiet house. She took a slow sip, the smoky burn spreading warm through her chest. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the tick of the clock and the faint chirp of crickets through the open window. The air smelled faintly of sage, carried in from the desert breeze. Peace, Pat thought. This was what peace felt like. Earned, not gifted. After a long pause, Pat reached for the polished poker set Rosa had given her. She placed it on the table, its brass plate gleaming. The real winner. She opened the lid, the crisp scent of new cards rising as she pulled the deck free. With the ease of years, she shuffled, the rhythmic snap and slide filling the room. Gloria leaned back, smiling knowingly. Going to teach me a few new tricks tonight. Pat dealt the cards with steady hands, one by one, the sound sharp against the wood. She studied the spread in front of her, then looked up, her eyes catching Gloria's in the fading light. A slow smile spread across her face, quiet but sure. Outside, the sun slid lower, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. Shadows stretched long across the floor, wrapping the women in a warm glow that felt like closure itself. Pat lifted her glass again, voice calm, resolute, and edged with a humor only time and victory could forge. Some bets you lose, others you win by folding the right people out.